and there's an interest. Digestion's huge. It's very huge in how our bodies run. And I was trying to think what to present. There's so much information. And I thought, well, it's going to be the last one for the day. And I don't need to get into all a bunch of stuff that's just a bunch of words and types of enzymes and what all. So let's just talk basic. Is that okay? Okay. I like basic. In Mind, Character, and Personality, around page 60-61, it says, before you treat the body, you have to treat the brain. Before you treat the brain, you've got to treat the blood. And you treat the blood by what you eat and what you drink. And I believe all the laws of health affect the blood. But when you go back and look at it, before you treat the body, you must treat the brain. And before you treat the brain, in order to treat the brain, you must treat the blood. And you treat the blood by what you eat and what you drink. Now, you still got your Bible here? You got one? There you go. Okay, 1 Corinthians 10:31. Okay. You're there. Whether therefore ye do. Yeah, we know that one. So why didn't God just say, whatever you do all to the glory of Him? Because He loves us. He wanted to give us a tip on how to take care of the body. There's a commandment that God gave an extra tip to. And it was the fourth commandment. He said, remember, because it's going to be forgotten. Well, in Corinthians, he tells us, whatever you do all to His glory. But he said, remember these two, really important. What you eat and what you drink. Now, why are those really important? What is the most important organ in the body? Why? Okay, even more importantly. That's how we talk to God. So, do you think Satan understands physiology? How the body works? Absolutely. So, the most important of the organ in the body is the brain, because it's how we communicate and discern God's Word. Communicate with God and discern His Word. Okay? So, what we just learned was, before you treat the brain, you must do what? Treat the blood. And you treat the blood by... Okay, so if Satan can take out what you eat and drink, it then messes up the... And then when you mess up the blood, it messes up the... And when you mess up the brain, you mess up your communication with God. Isn't that simple? That's very simple. So, what we eat and what we drink, digestion is so important. To run the body, yes. But most important, digestion affects brain function. Brain function affects how we discern God's Word. The gastrointestinal tract, just last year or year before last, they came out and said, we know there's a lot of communication between the gut and the brain. But they came out with a new communication. They can find no wires, no chemical communication. They said it's almost like it's Bluetooth. How the gut communicates with the brain. Mary Lou was pregnant with Walter. And I went over to the Ocoee and went rafting with a bunch of the administrators, and went back over to my aunt's to get something, pick up my dog, and then head on back up, pick up Merlot. And went out, I decided I better leave, it's starting to rain. Got in the car down to Fort Oglethorpe, and it started raining cats and dogs. And I drove just 2 blocks, came up on a stop sign, and I went right through that stop sign. And I was in Mary Lou's car. It was an IROC Z28. And they just don't have the best tires anyway, that's a fast car. And so I put on the brakes and I slid right through that intersection, right in front of the preacher that was coming to preach at the Baptist church on that corner. And he T-boned me. And it plump ruined that car. The road was wet, no one got hurt, we slid along, no problem. Just messed up the car real bad. We didn't have cell phones back in. It was in 87. So I went over to the house next door and I said, can I use the telephone? I need to call the law and I need to call my uncle, have him come over and pick me up. So I called the law, called my uncle, he came over, and he was a nurse anesthetist. And he said, tomorrow you're going to have green apple two-step. And again, what's the green apple two-step? Diarrhea. And I'm thinking, there's nothing wrong with my digestive system at all. I said, I'll be fine. What did I have the next day? Green apple two-step. Why? I just tore up my car. And so I was worried about it the next day. Does this affect this? Yes. Can this affect this? Absolutely. So, what we eat is very, very important, and how we digest that food is very, very important. Yes, it's important for every cell in the body. Inspiration tells us the bottom line. Who works in finances? Anybody work in finances? Bottom line, 2 lines underneath. You know, whatever the bottom line is, you write your number and you put 2 lines, and that's the bottom line. The bottom line to health, we are told, is the quality and flow of the blood. The quality and flow of the blood. Perfect health is perfect circulation. That's what we're told. Yes, life's in the blood. So, yes, it's important for every cell in the body, but the most important cell in the body is the brain cells. So we got to address digestion very importantly. Where does digestion begin? Not the process of, but where does digestion begin?
In the mouth.
In your nose.
Your eyes, what you see.
In the nose and then the eyes.
Senses.
Yes. Have you ever seen someone bite into a lemon and your saliva start generating? Yes? Okay. So today at this, I just thoroughly enjoyed dinner. And the biggest compliment you can give a Southern woman is to tell her, that was plumb good. Now, if you tell it's plumb awful, you better start running. She's going to throw an orange skillet at you. But it was delicious today. When we walked up to that table, did it look good? Yes, it did. Did it smell good? Digestion, we're told, begins what you're looking at and what you're smelling. Now, there's some things you walk up on, you're not hungry. You know what I'm talking about? Here. So, make food attractive. Make food smell good. Yes, it needs to taste good, but it needs to look presentable and it needs to smell presentable. That starts digestion. You're correct. The process of, though, breaking the food down starts in the mouth. There's several components that happen there in the mouth. And that is the mastication part, where you're chewing it and you're making it like baby food. That's the goal, is to make the food the consistency of baby food. You want to make as much surface area available. It's like when you're making an extract. You want to chop up your herb to where it has as much surface area to where it can, whether the alcohol on the tincture or the the vegetable glycerin in the extract can pull those phytochemicals out. If you've got a big old root and you stick that whole big old root in there, you've got this surface, but there's a lot inside that it can't get to, because so it needs diced up, chopped up, shredded up, we call cut and sifted, whatever, so it can have surface area. The same thing has to be true of our food in the mouth, because in the saliva you've got amylase, protease, lipase, other digestive enzymes that can start in the mouth, but for the most part is going to start in the first part of the stomach. If you don't have it, if you just swallow that food, you know people like that? It's not going to soak up the saliva. Therefore, in that first part of digestion, which is going to be somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, as we get older, and they say as we get into when Social Security starts, in those ages and on up, it's at least an hour and can go even longer. So the older we are, that process is longer. In that first part of digestion, the pepsin is breaking it down, but so is the amylase, protease, lipase, and those digestive enzymes that you got out of your spit. And if you didn't soak it up, it's not going to happen here. And if it doesn't happen here, then what happens is the pancreas and stomach have to overwork to produce other enzymes to try to break it down. The body is very smart. And so if you don't have enough enzymes in that part, other enzymes, the body identifies that, and they actually say it can enlarge the pancreas. An enlarged pancreas can be because of improper digestion of the foods, because you didn't have adequate enzymes to break it down. And the pancreas is working overtime. So, let's say that, and I've used this illustration here before, let's say that who's ever made concrete and wheelbarrow? Okay? So you got your wheelbarrow, and you pour in your sackcrete, you pour in your water, and you move it 2 or 3 times. Is it ready to pour in the hole? No, because the powder has to soak up the water until you have a mush. As you're looking, you don't want to see any dry powder, correct? Yes. Ladies, y'all make a cake. And you take the cake, you take the bowl, you pour in your powder, you pour in your liquid, whatever you put in there, and you stir it about 2 times, dump it into a cake pan, and it goes in the oven. No. You take a mixer to it, and you thoroughly mix it to where the powder soaked up all the liquid, and you have adequate liquid, therefore where you no longer have any more powder left. Yes? So think of your food like that cake. Well, see if this is better. If it's like that cake powder to where it totally soaks it up, or that sackcrete where it's soaking up the water, it doesn't get swallowed until it's wet enough that has happened. And how do you know that has happened? What part of your body tells you that? Your tongue. Your tongue is your quality assurance guy that says, I can swallow or not. So you want to chew it up to where it has the consistency. Do you remember baby food? Have y'all ever eaten baby food out of a little jar? Yeah, when the girls were little. You probably tried some of it. You didn't like it. That's the consistency you're wanting your food. Several things are happening there. One, it is soaking up the digestive enzymes. But the chewing mechanism, the chewing mixes it, the chewing masticates it or pulverizes it like a blender, but the chewing also, your saliva glands up here, it pumps the saliva out into your mouth when you're chewing. A snake bites you. The biting down process, that snake then squeezes the venom when it squeezes down to bite, it squeezes the venom out. Remember, if you want to get the venom out of a snake, you push up right here, and the venom will come out, right? Same thing for us. That chewing pumps more saliva. More saliva is digestive enzymes. And so you can see why digestion is so dependent on adequate chewing of the food. What happens if we drink with our meals? What's happening? The enzymes are diluted. Also, what happens is when you're drinking with your meals, I don't know if this is starting to die or not. When you're drinking with your meals, you don't produce as much saliva because there's more fluids there, and the body doesn't. So if you want more saliva, don't add the extra fluid to it. You'll produce more fluid. More saliva. And then you swallow it. Then what happens is it goes into the first part of the digestion, which has an alkaline pH. And as I said, it stays there for about 30 to 60 minutes. Older folks longer. And then it moves down to the next part of the stomach where the hydrochloric acid is. And as the stomach expands with food, it starts the production of hydrochloric acid. And when it's then built up enough and it drops it down below 5, then those enzymes that the mucosa makes start to breaking the food down. That's important. Taking care of the mucosa is very important, because if you have damaged mucosa, it's like a lining. It is a lining that protects the skin from the hydrochloric acid. And if you have damaged mucosa, the hydrochloric acid can eat a hole into the skin, and that's called an ulcer. But also, the mucosa makes a bunch of different enzymes that happen in a low pH. And if you damage the mucosa, you can reduce the amount of those enzymes breaking the food down. So it breaks it down into what's called a chyme. And then as it then comes on down, it then starts dripping that out into the small intestines, into the duodenum. When you drink with your meals. When you have fluids in the stomach has to get rid of fluid first. So as we're drinking with the meal, we're stopping digestion of the food product material, and we're having to process the liquids. And so that extends digestion. Digestion can be 3-4 hours. We can extend it even longer. We don't want digestion all day long. The stomach needs to rest in between meals, so you don't want long times of digestion. I have people who tell me, when I ask them, how many meals do you eat a day? Oh, I just eat one. What time do you eat? Well, I just eat all day long. One meal. So the stomach is working all day long. That's not healthy for the stomach. The stomach needs a rest period. The federal law says that breakfast in healthcare institutions, hospitals, nursing homes, breakfast can be no more, no less than 14 hours after supper. The noon meal can be no more, no less than 4 to 6 hours after breakfast, and the supper meal can be no more or no less than 6 hours after the noon meal. But in my state, Tennessee, it's more specific, it's more rigid. Dinner can be no more than 5 hours after breakfast, and supper can be no more than 5 hours after dinner. Dinner. What time of day is dinner? Pardon? Noon. Yeah. You have Christmas dinner, right? There was the Last Supper in the evening. So where did lunch come from? Pardon?
City people.
City people? That's exactly right. So when people moved from the country into the cities, started working in factories, People did not eat that big meal like we did on the farm, and then they ate a smaller meal. And so when they came home, they ate a larger meal. So the name dinner went from noon till supper. But where'd the word lunch come from? Read back into, I told you I don't like to read, but I do because I want to learn. Read back into medical literature back in the 1800s. In the 1800s, they talked about lunch, and they said we should not eat lunch. It was unhealthy for us. Guess what time of day lunch was? You had breakfast, dinner, supper at that time. It was the meal what we called a midnight snack. And so it was a light meal, very small. When people went to work in the cities, they became what's called city slickers. And they went in the factories. They took the name of that light name of a meal and put it as lunch because it was light. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting. So we don't want to drink with the meals because we have to, it prolongs digestion. We have to get rid of the liquids first. It affects the hydrochloric acid, dilutes the hydrochloric acid. And so there's a bunch of things that drinking with meals is not good for. Let's stay in the stomach a little while before we go to the duodenum. So in the stomach, what can affect digestion in the stomach?
Exercise.
Okay, exercise. What else?
Stress.
Stress. Exactly. So if you're trying to fix a health problem, a person has a problem with digestion. So here's the keys that you have to look at. You have to identify the organ and or system that's affected. You have to identify the organ or the system that's being affected. And you have to identify the organs and systems that can affect that organ and system. Does that make sense? Example, you got a stomach issue. You're having poor digestion. You're not breaking the food down like it should be. Stress can affect this. Stress is a what problem? It's a brain problem. So in order to have adequate nutrition being broke down here to be small enough that it can be absorbed in the duodenum that we'll talk about in a minute. So what can affect that is the shutting down of the digestion process by stress. We got to fix the brain so we can fix stress so that we can then fix this problem. Does that make sense? So, I'll say it again. In order to fix a health problem, you've got to identify the organ involved or the system involved and the organs and systems that can affect that organ and its system. Number one. Number two, you have to take away anything that can harm those organs and systems. Anything that can harm them or make them not work right. And you have to provide those organs and systems with what they need to make them work right. That's how you reverse disease. So, stress. What does stress do? Shuts down digestion. So when you shut down digestion, you're not breaking the food down from macronutrients to micronutrients. See, because when it leaves the stomach in the chyme, it goes into the small intestines, to the duodenum, and different things are broke up in the different parts of the small intestines. The duodenum absorbs some things, and then as you go on down, and different areas of the small intestines absorb different nutrients. But you have little fingers in the in there that I call them fingers, and they look like little vacuum cleaners, and they have little like little octopus fingers, but they have holes in them, micro screens. Have you ever seen anybody grate apples? You run the apples through, and the little ones go first, and the mediums, and the big ones. Well, that's what happens in the small intestines with the villi. Is it has these little vacuum cleaners that have little small screens on them, unless you have something called leaky gut. leaky, like diverticulosis and diverticulitis, that's only in the colon. But in the small intestine, you can have something called leaky gut. And that looks like bullet holes, or it looks like lesions, or it looks like a little flower at the top, inflammation up here. And that allows macronutrients instead of just micronutrients, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it's made to only absorb micro. You got macroeconomics, microeconomics. Well, here macro means big, micro means small. So only the little guys are supposed to be absorbed into those little fingers. And in those little fingers, those little villi, you've got blood vessels and you have lymph vessels. Or lymph vessels. And both the lymph is soaking stuff up and the blood vessels is soaking stuff up. That comes from the chyme that is going through the small intestines. Here's the problem. There was a nurse, and I mentioned this before, I think, one time. There was a nurse over in West Tennessee that, to make a little extra money, she was drawing labs. And she would go to people individually as a group, churches and businesses and whatever, and draw their labs. And then she would go and get the results. And as a good nurse, she'd say, okay, your cholesterol is this, it needs to be this. You know, your vitamin D is this, your B12 is this, your protein. And there was this group of folks that she took their labs, and most all of them, their protein was low. This whole group of people, like in here, their protein was low. I wonder why. So she went individually. What do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for dinner? What do you eat for supper? What do you eat for breakfast? What do you eat for dinner? Everybody, every single person. Everybody identified a diet with adequate protein. Didn't make sense. So she went and got a friend of hers who was a physician and said, help me out with this. There's a lot of people here who got protein deficiency. They say they're eating adequate food. What's going on here? So he comes in and he gets involved in talking to these people and finding out what was wrong. Again, we've got to look at the organ or system and the organ and systems that affect it. Well, guess what he found? There was a problem up here. The problem up here were this group of people, it was a church. And this group of people worried about everything. Everything you did and everything you did and everything you did. They were conservative Christians, but they worried about everything and everybody. It caused cortisol to go up, adrenaline to go up. And when worrying happens, it shuts down digestion, and you don't break those nutrients down like they're supposed to, and it then just goes right on out through the chyme as a macronutrient instead of a micronutrient, and it goes right out the feces. So one, they're losing all the nutrition that they got from their beans and taters and brown rice and whatever they're eating for protein, but their body wasn't getting adequate nutrition because of, as you mentioned, stress. And so that's why you have to look at the other things going on in the body that affect this. And stress significantly affects digestion. So as we get the chyme into the small intestines, you've got the liver that's producing, we won't get into that, producing, anything is held by the gallbladder lets it out. You really need a gallbladder. Just talk to somebody who's had their gallbladder out. There's a lot of folks say they just can't eat certain things anymore. It didn't fix everything like they were told it was going to be. It's good for the alimony check, but it just for the surgeon. But anyway, you need your gallbladder. You need your appendix. And so what's happening in the small intestines is you've got to have a low pH in the stomach to trigger then the production of the enzymes for the small intestines that is an alkaline. So if you drink a lot of water, which during the meal, that can affect pH. If it's not low enough, and doctors give you stuff to mess with your acid, and the real problem is you really don't have enough acid. But so if you don't have the right pH here, you then don't kick on the production of the enzymes you need in the small intestines, which then bring the pH to an alkaline pH for those enzymes that are produced to break it down in the small intestines. And then as it goes through the small intestines, it's absorbed in the different areas of the small intestine, different nutrients, proteins, fats, carbohydrates, different things are absorbed different places into the villi. And then there's things that are absorbed on when it gets into the colon, that we even have further absorption. And you think that you can just have a colon cut out and give you an ileostomy and everything's fine. No. God gave us a colon. Keep that colon. They were going to cut my colon out. They told me I was going to die if I didn't have my colon taken out. And they said, we're going to cut your colon out, but still you may still die. Well, I went to another doctor and got another opinion. And in 6 months, my colon was totally healed. He did this kind of stuff that we talked about today that I learned from a cardiologist that shared with me to go see this guy. From a dinner that I'd had 5 years before with him. God works amazingly. And in 6 months, my colon was plumb healed. And it's still healed 21 years later. And I didn't lose the colon like they expected. But there's more stuff on digestion. Yes, it's true that we don't want to mix fruits and vegetables in digestion. Fruits and vegetables, Dr. Thrash said it causes like a tornado effect. And you start having breaking down of the fruits first, and then that causes fermentation issues, and it just causes problems. But when you juice, you can mix fruits and vegetables. Because when you have the fiber, it causes time release, and digestion extends out for several hours. But when you juice and pull the fiber out, and you only are drinking the juice, it's already down in the small intestines being absorbed within 15, no more than 20 minutes. And what that does is that allows you net a lot more energy by doing that, because you expend a lot of energy digesting food with fiber. As much as it takes to go work out at the gym, you expend that much energy digesting food with fiber. That's why doctors will tell you with cardiac issues, patients that have poor cardiac function, they will tell them to eat small meals. That's why at UAB, patients that have significant cardiac failure and weakness, they'll tell them to juice for 70 days to allow that heart to rest more and not have to deal with producing energy to digest food. So, yes?
What are the effects of laying down and taking a nap right after you eat a big meal?
Feels good.
Yeah. When you go to sleep, within 3 hours of eating, that food has a propensity to putrefy and ferment because it slows down that digestion process. You ever taken a nap Sabbath afternoon after a big old Sabbath dinner, and then things didn't feel quite right? Or if you eat late in the evening and you don't feel like eating breakfast, because they actually have found that the next morning that still there's food there and it's already putrefied and fermented because you went to sleep on that food. So you don't want to go to sleep on food. Yes, good question.
What if you have dry mouth? What do you do for that digestive?
Good question. Very good question. I used to drink a lot with my meals, especially when I go to a Mexican restaurant. I love Mexican food. And I'm serious. One pitcher was mine, and I'd fill it up at least twice at the meal, have them fill it up. And I drank a lot with my meals until I learned this issue when I was sick by this doctor. And I ate real weird. I'll pick out something nice that I like at the beginning, And then what I like the most, or the items I like the most, I leave them till last, like my dessert. And then I work on the other stuff one at a time. And then I'll enjoy this. Well, when I had to quit drinking with my meals, sometimes things are dry. And so it's messed up my eating to where now I do, like if I've got green beans, it's kind of some liquid in it, or cream corn, it has some liquid in it, I'll mix it with something that's dry. Take a bite of that, then I'll take a bite of this and work on it. And that's how I deal with that. So I try to make sure that there's something kind of moist in there, that I can put more moisture in what's real dry.
Like with the dry mouth, it's not just during eating, it's like a continual dry mouth.
Sure. And so even when, during that time of digestion, there's a problem. Definitely, in between meals, you can sip, an hour after the meal, but you're talking about that hour after the meal that you've got that real dry mouth. You don't want to drink during that time. You really don't. You can suck on something during that time because digestion's still going on. But when digestion stopped, you really don't want to suck on stuff because even chewing gum kicks digestion back on. The mouth thinks that stomach thinks you're going into digestion. So when you're digesting that food, you got digestion going on anyway. You could suck on something like slippery elm lozenge or something to kind of give you some moisture there during that time. But after the milk digestion, you don't want to use that. You want to be sipping on the water because you don't want to use that lozenge or something in between meals. Yes, ma'am.
Now, sometimes by a dietitian or whatever, that if you want to lose weight, you down a great big glass of water before you sit down to eat.
Yes.
Isn't that pretty counterintuitive?
Yes. I tell people to drink water before they eat, but 30 minutes before they eat. For two reasons. One, it kind of feels, it's going to be out, but it kind of feels, they've got something they've had. But the other thing is dehydration has the same desire as hunger. And there's many times that people get those two mixed up and they think they're hungry, but they're really thirsty. It's kind of like, how you'll get a patient that says, "Oh, I think I'm having a heart attack." And so you run an EKG on them and you find out there's nothing wrong with the heart. They just got indigestion. But it causes pain. They think they have they're having angina. The danger is when they are having angina and they think they're just having indigestion, and you're missing it. And so some things have a similar event, just like dehydration and hunger. And so by drinking, hopefully throughout, and then they can drink, before the meal a fair amount. It's going to be free flow, and so it's going to flush on out. But that can kind of satisfy something when in the stomach. But not within that definitely not 15 minutes before they ate, better 30 minutes before they ate. You're right. And another thing out there that people are really messing up on right now, and that is they want to lose weight, and so they go into interval fasting, or they call intermittent fasting. Both terms are used. Intermittent fasting. And the fad on intermittent fasting is to eat dinner and eat supper and skip breakfast. A couple problems with that. When you skip breakfast, you increase your risk of a heart attack and a stroke by 150% because the platelets are thicker and stickier. And breakfast helps to thin those out. The other thing that happens is when you eat breakfast, it increases metabolism and you burn calories. When you eat dinner, the noon meal, it increases metabolism, you burn calories. And around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Dr. Koop found that our metabolism starts shutting off. And then, when you eat in the evenings, your metabolism's not going, and so you're not breaking the food down properly. I lost 50 pounds in right at 3 months by eating a good breakfast, eating a good dinner, and not eating supper. I wasn't eating breakfast. I wasn't eating dinner, except Sabbath, and maybe Sunday was more of a brunch thing. But I'd eat a big old supper, whenever I got home. Mary Lou put it in the microwave and heat it up, and that's no good either. So I was well into 200 pounds, and Mary Lou says, you got to do something, because I quit climbing the stairs and not producing like I should at the house, because I was saying my knees were hurting, and she decided I needed to get a little healthier to get more work out of me. And so we're supposed to work, aren't we? Yeah. And so she said, you're going to have breakfast before you leave home. And I usually worked late hours, and so I'd sleep as late as I could and get up and go to work. Because that's the way my brain used to work. Doesn't work that way anymore. I'm ready to go to sleep. And it took a lot of praying of hers to get me to get that way. Because she'd go to bed early and I'd stay up to 2, 3 in the morning working. So she'd give me a big breakfast, and then she connived with my secretary and had her call in my dietary tray to be sent to the employee lounge. She'd call me on the radio and say, Walt, your tray's ready. And I'd have to leave working on the floor, go and eat dinner. And then she got rid of my M&M machine, which I was probably doing about a pound a day in M&Ms. And I'd go through a 3-pound bag about every 3 days. And I said it was for my staff and other people to have. I made sure it worked good. So I was eating a good breakfast. I was eating a good dinner. I was eating more calories than I was eating before, even though I was eating all them M&Ms. I was still eating now more calories. But when I got home, there was no food for me. And I mean, it was tough. I felt mistreated. It was hard. And for about a month, it was real hard. But I kind of got used to it. And 3 months, I didn't go on any crazy diet or nothing. I didn't change my exercise. I didn't change my water. All I did was eat a healthy breakfast, a healthy dinner at a healthcare facility. Now, that's not the best food out there. But nothing after 3. And I lost 50 pounds in 3 months. Now, this is interesting. A year ago, 2 years ago, I got a call by a good friend of mine. He's in internal medicine over in North Carolina. He's so excited. We enjoy learning and sharing with each other. He called me and says, "Well, you got. This is amazing." He said, "I just went to a seminar, and he said we thought that cancer transmitted through the DNA, but we found it transmits through the mitochondria. Remember the mitochondria? It looks like a piece of rice, and it's got little stripes on it. He said, we learned that when you eat after 2:30 in the afternoon, the mitochondria changes, and it's more prone to transmit cancer. And so he said, if you'll not eat after 2:30, and plus it even looks different, he said. But he said, you're less prone, the mitochondria is less prone to transmit the cancers. And it's also, if you do have cancer, you're less prone to continue spreading the cancer if you have the cancer." I said, "Well, that's interesting, George." I said, "Have you heard about Coop's information on the metabolism in 3 o'clock?" So he hadn't, so I shared. So something's going on around 2:30, 3 o'clock when after that, affects how the body runs. Yes, sir?
That's kind of when Christ died.
Yes?
Well, you have the morning sacrifice,
Yes.
sanctuary. You have the 9 o'clock, and you have the 3 o'clock.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is interesting.
That is interesting.
Because the blood was shed.
Isn't that interesting? Yes.
There may not be a coincidence, but
Yeah.
sometimes there is.
You're right. You're exactly right. I see that. Okay, any questions on digestion? Yes, sir.
And share my experience.
Yes, sir.
I used to be 140, 145 pounds. When I started working in the nursing home, and I started eating later in the evening. And then I quit the nursing home, etc., years later. But I developed acid reflux really bad.
Mm-hmm.
My sister died at 49 from acid reflux that transferred into cancer.
Yeah.
And, but here's the thing. I re-studied what the Bible and Spirit of Prophecy said about health and diet. I went to 2 meals a day. I got off dairy. I was 180 some pounds. I got off of dairy. I stopped drinking carbonated beverages, and I would allow at least 3 hours before going to bed that I would not eat, and on 2 meals a day, which is usually around 7 or 8 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. In 6 months, my acid reflux was gone. I came down to 150 and below in weight, and I'm still around that, 145, 150 now. You know, if we follow these principles, we are going to have better health in the end.
We are.
And that is, 2 meals a day was a real blessing. I didn't eat after 2 or 3, and like you're bringing out. And I, you know, those changes, I made those changes, and it made all the difference in the world in my my digestion.
Let me share something else that affects digestion. I'm taking some really cool courses right now in nutrition. I'm really enjoying them. And I learned something in one of my fall classes. I think it was in the fall. Yeah. And, or in the spring of last year, I forgot, but even one of the courses I took last year. And, well, I've known from, who's heard of Bob Jorgensen? Okay, Bob Jorgensen. Bob had found that through the University of North Carolina, Department of Agriculture, that if you have a huge area of farm and you grow half of it in heirloom and half of it in hybrid, and I think I've shared this before here, that your hybrid produce or seeds only uptake approximately 40% of your heirloom seeds in nutrients out of that soil. It also does not take up chemicals such as cobalt and it doesn't even pull up at all. So that's a challenge. A reason that we need to eat heirloom. In a course that I took, this it was in the fall. It was in the fall. I learned that, let's say you've got an heirloom tomato and you have a hybrid tomato. Which one, once you pick it off the vine, is going to start rotting faster? The heirloom. The heirloom's going to start dying quicker. Well, they started working on this in the early 1900s, and they used a chemical that was very even similar to aspirin, and they would soak the produce in this chemical, and it would get rid of a chemical in the heirloom seeds. And so it had a longer shelf life because this chemical wasn't there, because they killed it with soaking it with this chemical. But then they found that they could hybridize the produce, and they got a longer shelf life. Why? Because it hybridized out the majority of those chemicals that were causing the tomato to rot faster. Would you like to know what those chemicals were? Digestive enzymes. That's why the tomato starts rotting faster. That's why the broccoli starts rotting faster, because the digestive enzymes that are in that plant that are meant for us to help digest in that first portion of digestion in the stomach, they mostly hybridized out. Because when you pluck that, see, in the Garden of Eden, did Eve put food up? No. Did she send it across the world? Did she put it in the refrigerator? She picked it and she ate it. Adam picked it and they ate it. And so God made our food to pick and eat. And you've got all those enzymes in the food that help to break it down in the first portion of digestion. So when we eat hybridized food, which is the majority of what we buy in the store, we don't have those digestive enzymes that we need. See, you need it's a partnering. Digestive enzymes are a partnering. It's a partnering between what's in our food and what the body produces. The body produces enzymes, digestive enzymes. But the food is also supposed to have digestive enzymes, and that together they break the food down properly. But when you don't have it here, and then when you don't chew your food decently here, then the body tries to make up for it, and it causes diseased organs that are trying to make up for it, that produce enzymes. Isn't that interesting? It's very interesting. So what can we do? What can we do? Do what y'all do.
Grow your own food.
Grow your own food. That's the best way to deal with it. Grow your own food. And in growing your own food, you know what's in the soil. You amend your soil, whether it's with soft rock phosphate, whether it's green sand, whether it's with blackstrap molasses, whatever you use to bring it up to what it needs to be. And then you choose your seeds, heirloom seeds. And then you pick it, not green, the tomato. You pick it where it's just perfect. Going to make a perfect, what we call a Mater sandwich. And there's nothing better than a just ripe Mater sandwich. Unless you have arthritis, and that could be a problem because it's a nightshade. But so you pick it what's called vine ripe. That's your best food. But what about folks that can't grow their gardens for whatever reason? You need those enzymes that would have been in those heirloom produce that's now not in the hybrid produce. So what you can do is you can take digestive enzymes. That's a backup that you can do. Not as good, but it's a whole lot better than not taking them, and it significantly helps. You take it at the beginning of each meal. Now there's different digestive enzymes out there. Some have some have a full spectrum digestive enzymes. You want a good quality digestive enzyme. And that will help in that first part of digestion in the stomach. And then as it goes on down to give you those enzymes that you need that you didn't get in the food that is deficient because you don't have your own garden.
How about organic?
Okay? Organic can be hybrid. There's nothing that says organic can't be hybrid. It just means they didn't spray it. Your best, you've got conventional, you've got organic. But I went out to Portland, Oregon back in 2004, a 3-day seminar, and where we were testing food to look at the nutrition in the food. And we were going to grocery stores, we were going to farmers markets and buying up food, and we were testing the nutritional value. And we were comparing conventional versus organic. We actually found that over 50% of the testing that we did, the conventional had more nutrition than the organic did. Why? They were using fertilizers and stuff, and these guys didn't care about the amendment in the soil. All they worried, because in organic, they don't use regular fertilizers, and so they were using piddly stuff. They were just worried about not spraying it with stuff, which is good. But the nutrients, we found over 50% of the testing that 3 days, conventional had more nutrition than organic. But yet the conventional had poisons in it, so it's bad for us. So what do? You go to what's called biological gardening. So you got conventional, organic, and then take a quantum jump over to biological gardening. And biological gardening has just copious more nutrients in it, nutrition, because biological gardening, they look at the soil. They make sure that there's adequate nutrients in the soil. They use heirloom seeds. They may use things like kudzu. You can take a 55-gallon barrel. Do y'all know what sun tea is? Stump tea, sun tea? Well, you make sun tea out of kudzu. And so you fill a 55-gallon barrel with kudzu, and you put water in it, and you let it make tea for about 20 to 30 days. You put a spout at the bottom, and you pour it out, and you put it in a sprayer, and you spray the leaves of your products, of your garden, and those nutrients. Again, kudzu is full of nutrients. And so the leaves soak up those nutrients, and then it will then go into the produce that plant's producing. And so biological gardening, they're looking at the soil, making sure there's adequate nutrients in the soil, because if it's not in the soil, it's not going to be in the plant. If the seed can't pull it up, even though it's in the soil, it's not going to be in the plant. So they use the heirloom seeds. And then they've got the plant, and then they're even putting more stuff on the plant as they, I forgot what that's called when you spray the top of the plant. And then you want to pick it vine ripe. And that's your best nutrition. That's the best way to garden. Yes, sir.
You know, we were designed to learn the satisfaction in seeing something growing and the anticipation of tasting it is pretty fun. And then it's very rewarding and satisfying. But it's healthy stuff is not fast food. And we've ruined our idea of just give it to me right now, fast, whatever it cost, you know, but I don't want it to cost something.
Right.
We don't want sacrifice first. We just want it all right now. But gardening is one of those, the farmer has to wait for it. He's in a partnership with Christ. And it's pretty cool because it teaches you a lot of valuable lessons.
Like pulling the weeds out when they're small?
Yeah.
Pulling the sins out when they're small? Yes, ma'am.
We actually learned something when we were taking care of Tom's mom and dad. Tom's dad had diabetes, and he was always told he could not eat potatoes. But if we went out to our garden, dug up the potatoes, and got him cooking and served them right away, no problem whatsoever with his blood sugar.
Yeah. It's just it's quantum different. If you want to get a kid to eat food, you know how kids don't eat healthy food? They want to eat just junk food? Put them in the garden growing food. Do they want to eat it then?
Oh, yeah.
Our local school up in our little community. Now we're up in a little community up in Grassy Fork, and I mean, we're back up in the woods. And those families are back up in the wood people. But I tell you what, that little school, we are in the top 4 scholastically in the whole state of Tennessee. That little mountain school. And we're in the top, I forgot what, in the whole United States. So those kids are really learning well. Well, that principal, she just retired, and I noticed this summer they didn't do what she would do. The new principal's not doing it. But what she would do is she saw the importance of nutrition. And so she had those kids out there growing a garden. Because if that kid grows the cucumber, grows the broccoli, grows the tomato, grows the cauliflower, and if he put it in the ground, he had to take care of it. She had to take care of it. Are they more prone to eat it? Absolutely they are. And she was very wise. The school there, again, we're just up in the mountains. There's nothing in that little community. Nothing. But a little old gas station. Well, it doesn't even have gas. It was a gas station. It just serves some food out of there. You got the fire hall and the school. That's it. There's nothing else up on the mountain. That's it. And there's a little creek that runs by it, big creek. And if the kid was good today and she noticed it, come on, let's go. You come with me. And again, a very high scholastic school. But to reward you, come on, let's go. Come on, come to my office. She'd get her fishing pole. You pick your fishing pole out. Let's go fishing. And she'd go fishing with that little kid for maybe 30 minutes. But she rewarded because my mountain community, they love fishing. If they could have gone out shooting, she would have gone out there shooting something. But she knew how to work with children and to get the scholastics up. And she knew the importance of food, and she had a garden where those kids were making the food, putting it in. Any other questions on digestion? Yes?
I got a question. You said you should eat breakfast and then dinner before 3 o'clock, okay? To be healthy,
Yes.
okay? I'm a complete vegan. I only eat 2 meals a day. But I eat one after 3 o'clock, and I've always ate one in the morning. Okay? I always had a span of 5 hours between the two. My test of everything taken out is it had to have been before 3 o'clock or you're going to do damage afterward. Why isn't it doing it to my system?
You're eating at what times?
I eat like, let's say 11 o'clock and I eat at 7 o'clock.
In the evening.
In the evening.
Okay. There's no... Go ahead.
I didn't mean to put you on.
No, not at all.
Saying,
There's no question, and I'm very cautious saying that, but it is true that genes can sometimes make a difference. Even if a person who eats unhealthy, and you're eating hog jowl, chitlins, pork rinds, and whatever else, rattlesnake and coon and bear, and they still may be healthy. But genetically, they've got some good genes. That does happen. Not that I believe in genetic predisposition and everything they talk about. So you could have some good genes there. And it could be for your body handles it well. We know in inspiration it's said that the best is eat a good breakfast, a good dinner, 2 meals a day. But it did say for some occupations, 3 meals a day is needed. So we don't totally throw out that third meal because we're told it might be beneficial. Yes, sir.
Also, she does say that, as you said earlier, that genetics, people have passed on such wonderful genes from their grandparents and great-grandparents that their body can endure a great assault, but because of what their grandparents have done and their great-grandparents have passed on to them, they're able to handle it. So genetically, there are that amount of people who can do a lot of damage to themselves, but because of their great genetic,
Yes.
they're able to endure. It's not right for them. God said
Correct.
to hold them accountable.
Yes.
They can endure physically a lot of assault that most people cannot.
And it can go both ways.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I noticed also that he said he had breakfast at 11 a.m. I'm sorry, but that's time for my dinner. Okay, so he's got a later time clock is what it sounds
Right.
like to me.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I became very ill with digestive issues in November, and in January started doctoring and done intermittent fasting. But I eat for food 8, and I lost 60 pounds.
There's no question. People
But I
are...
think it is personal.
Yeah, there are people who are doing the intermittent fasting, doing the 2 meals, the noon meal, the evening meal, and having benefit based on what they were doing before. Could it be better if they did breakfast and dinner? Possibly.
I'm considering changing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, but it's definitely better than what they were doing before. Yes.
We used to have a statement, early to bed, early to rise.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that you're supposed to have a very good breakfast and dinner, but a very light meal in the evening if you're going to have it.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't go to bed at 8 o'clock like we used to. On average.
Yes.
We don't get up at 5 in the morning like we used to, as it were. So,
Right. Yes, and we have shifted the clock a little. I have, when I sit down with people with health problems and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, what time do you eat breakfast? What time do you eat dinner? What time do you eat supper? I'm finding 8 o'clock's early for supper. I'm finding is normal 9, 10, 10:30 is when people are eating supper.
That's going to keep you up.
Yes. And they're not going to bed till 1, 2 in the morning. Right. Yes, ma'am.
So I think one of the things that we have to consider with certain people is that it's not just one thing that contributes to health. We
Yes.
also have to consider how is his temperament sleeping, what's his stress
Sure.
levels. So even though we could have a habit that's different than what is suggested, those other habits could also cover a lot of things, I guess you want to say, but it could also help us in some way.
Yes.
Because those all come together.
And
We see that with a lot of people who, like you have farmers or whoever, they
Yes.
eat a lot of meats and so forth, but they go to bed early, they rise early,
they sweat.
they work hard. My grandfather
Yes.
But, you know, he also drank and smoked.
Sure.
And still had a pretty good life for a while. It helped him out for so long because of his hard work prior
Yes.
to. So it's again not just one thing. It's not just the eating. It's all the other laws of health and how does that person take care of it. So that would also help us too.
That's exactly right. And if you put them all together, you could have even improved performance of what you're even having now.
You know, this is a different group here than the average society. You know, and the discipline of diet is for our good. You know, Christ, his diet was fish. His diet was, I mean, he had a bunch of guys that knew how to fish. So guess what? They ate a lot of fish, I'm
Right.
sure, and a lot of lamb or goat. But they bled the blood. They took the blood out of it. They didn't eat the fat. You know,
Right.
they were eating the Hebrew diet. We're not given a health message to just live on this earth longer and be, you know, healthy. It's for a purpose of compassion. And when you go through sickness, there's other people you're going to find around you and say, I have exactly that same problem. Or, what are you doing? Can you share that with me? And you can say, well, yeah, I can share it with you, but it's trust in divine power. It's God that's helping you go through your diet. Because, and you don't mess with somebody's diet. You don't try to tell somebody that, you don't mess with it, because no one can tell somebody else how they should
Right.
live. And that's like, it's all the way back to the Garden of Eden.
In the South, and I come over here, when I went to UT, they taught us that the Tennessee mind is the hardest mind to change in the United States. And it said the North Carolinian mind is the second hardest mind to change. But the hardest of the hardest mind was the Appalachian mind. We're real hard to change. Daddy did it, Granddaddy did it, it's good enough for me. It's like if it's good for Paul and Silas, it's good enough for me. And so we make decisions based on what our parents did. I remember I was asking, I had a lady work for me, she was a psychologist, and we went to go visit a hospital in the next county away, and on the way I asked her, I said, why are you Methodist? And it was like, duh, my daddy's Methodist. And I said, well, why is your daddy Methodist? His daddy's Methodist. I said, but why are you a Methodist? Because my daddy's a Methodist. Now this is a lady, she's a psychologist. And so that's that Southern mind. And so when I meet with people and they need to change their diet, I don't tell them in my neck of the woods, just as you said, don't mess with food. I don't tell them, you know, that biscuits and gravy's killing you, because I just told him his wife is fixing food that's killing him, so his wife is killing him. And so is his mama and his grandma. And I just cut down his mama and his grandma, and you don't do that. And so I'll talk about, did you know how good blueberries are? And how good a banana is? And how good this is? And you try to fill the plate with good stuff and the other stuff kind of fall off the plate. That's how you got to work with those minds. Because if you attack their diet, you're attacking personal. You really are. Yes. Yes.
I was going to just share something. A friend of mine, I was kind of struggling. I do the 2 meal a day thing too, but with working and stuff, you know, you got to work around the hours that you work and stuff. And so I found for myself, I eat my meal around between 10 and 11, and then my second meal between 4 and 5. Between my second meal between 4 and 5. And then I was talking to my friend who's a medical missionary, and we were talking about, you know, how do I get a variety of foods and stuff, you know, a good variety, and just talking about things like that. And she said what they're doing, she lives in Kentucky, she said her and her husband started eating their fruit and veggie meal, their veggie meal, the first meal of the day, and then do the fruit meal and in the evening or towards, you know, the second meal, because it's easier to digest, and it's a lighter meal, and especially in the summertime. whatnot, it just is more satisfying to eat the cool fruit in the evening. So,
And I find construction workers, when they're wanting to go out on the job, they'll eat more of that supper meal for breakfast, and then for the noon meal, they will eat that light meal.
yeah, the heavier one.
Yes. In the South, it's very common. Well, it was very common because they're now eating pizzas and stuff, Pizza Hut and McDonald's. But it was very common growing up for the Southern family to eat breakfast food for supper. Very common. It was a lighter meal. Yes, sir.
There was no such thing as breakfast food. Food was generally eaten, whatever you had that was heavy and healthy. It wasn't called breakfast food per se. It was just a meal.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a good, or learned a good comparison that if you break up breakfast, it breaks fast.
It is. It's breaking the fast.
It's, yeah,
Yes.
would be the most important.
Yes. Yes.
You know, I'm in construction, and we were in the South. I've been in the South and in California, and here the weather recently. This is more like California, but what works best for myself and also the people that are around me is if you have a heavy breakfast with, cereal and your proteins like tofu or beans, or you're eating. I even eat vegetables, steamed vegetables in the morning. That noon break, if you took time to have your water, your noon break, you're just laying out underneath the sun, underneath of a shade tree, and you're taking a nap. So you're like some watermelon or slice of watermelon or cantaloupe. I mean, you're wiped out. So you do get hungry for that supper, because at lunchtime you don't feel like eating anything.
Sure.
Because you're exhausted.
Right.
So yeah, it's so hot. So then the evening, the temptation is now you want to fill back up those calories, because you're hungry. And I think that's where Mrs. White was talking about that third meal, because she was, I think, writing from speaking of hot climate. Now, if it's a cold climate, you're going to be eating to stay warm. It's just the opposite. So I think temperature has a lot on how you what you do with your diet.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. The last thing I want to talk about on digestion is food sensitivities. There's a lot of food sensitivities out there. And y'all probably heard of the elimination diet. And there's all kinds of elimination diets. But what happens, there's different, you can juice as an elimination diet. You can juice vegetables and maybe have a little apple juice with it. But that's an excellent elimination diet, because most of the fruit is fine to eat on the elimination diet, with exceptions that some say that citrus is a problem on the elimination diet. You want to not use that in that process, which I don't. The other is if a person has inflammation, they may want to reduce the nightshades. And nightshades are tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, and tobacco. And lobelia. Lobelia is actually a nightshade also. Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, pepper, and tobacco. So what's the problem with tobacco? If they smoke, if they dip, if they chew, or if the spouse smokes, then that can cause the inflammation, causing that arthritis, or even especially arthritis. Exacerbate it, shall I say. So an elimination diet, my favorite two elimination diets is either a juicing, like Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. Has everybody seen Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead? Yeah, everybody seen it? Don't do movie 2, do movie 1. Movie 2 he messed up on. Or do the Duke diet, Dr. Kempner's diet, which is brown rice and fruit for breakfast, brown rice and a nice big old salad for dinner, and no oil, no dressing, no salt, no cheese, no meat, and if you put something on it, squeeze a little lemon on it, If they have inflammation, then don't put any tomatoes in it, or don't use salsa on it. And you do that, it's recommended for at least 3 weeks, better yet, 3 months. And so when I go over to Africa and do this program, or I do, as of late, of last year and this, earlier last year I was in Africa, but then the rest of the times I was supposed to be there and the times I was supposed to be there this year, I've been doing Zoom classes with them. It's a 2-week program where they come from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the evening, Sunday through Friday. On Sabbath, they come for Sabbath school and for church. And then again another Sunday through Sabbath, and we'll do a 3-day water fast, and then we'll do the Duke diet. Normally at home, I'll put folks on a juice fast for, say, at least 14 to 21 days. Then I'll go the Duke. But the challenge is, in Rwanda, some of the challenge is having adequate juicers. And so we haven't done that, just due to supply. And we have them stay on that program for 3 months. It's phenomenal the outcomes that we're having over there doing that, or where we do it at home. And it's an elimination diet. So you eliminated those foods that are more prone to be a problem. Then you start adding foods back in, one at a time. One of the problems that physicians do is they'll say, well, let's see if you have nightshade problems. And so they'll say, stop eating tomatoes for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, how was it? No, my hands are still hurting. Well, it wasn't tomatoes. Okay, now let's try potatoes for 10 days. And then, your peppers for 10 days. What's the problem in that methodology? You're still eating the other ones. And so you got to plumb stop them, all of the nightshades. Be off them enough time that you get it out of the system, which is at least 2 weeks, better yet a month, better yet even 3 months, and then add just one of them in and eat it pretty heavy for 1 day. Many times within that first day, you will, if you eat it really strong, if you've had an allergy to it, it'll come back with those symptoms or signs. If not the first day, usually by the second day, you're going to know it. So that comes back in. Then you want to do a little science here. You stop it for 2 weeks. Get it out of the system again. And then do a second try. And the second try, if it does it again, then you know you have a food sensitivity issue with tomatoes. And so then you put that aside and you just don't go to tomatoes. And then you try potatoes, then you try peppers, and the other foods you'll add. You'll try soy, you'll try wheat, you'll try different things as you start bringing things in, but only one at a time. Because if you add, say, well, I think I can do 2. Well, you don't know which one if you started. So that's the proper way of doing the elimination diet. And we've found extreme benefit for that. Yes, you can go and take a blood test, and I highly recommend the blood test. But you can be well over $2,000 in cost. Your insurance company may not cover it. And so it's a whole lot cheaper to do the elimination diet. You may find at the very beginning you get a little sick during the elimination diet. Within the first, say, 3 days, 4 days, maybe 5, because it's also a detox diet. And so your liver's having some challenges, and it's called the Hertz syndrome. Dr. Hertzheimer is the one that identified this. And so you may have some flu-like kind of symptoms or whatever in that first several days. Any questions on that? Any questions in general about digestion? All right. It's all yours, sir. Would you pray? Please.